Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm going to walk you through carbon pricing or carbon tax because there's different words they'll use to describe it, but it's the price for carbon. And I'll show you how it actually impacts the end users, the consumers, and the end users, consumers are typically the taxpayers in the country. Now, this presentation is one perspective of carbon tax, carbon pricing. It's not deemed to be the only perspective, but you're more than apt to go out and read what the banks say, TD, Royal, or even the Chambers of Commerce or the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and they'll give you a comprehensive assessment of any sort of taxation in terms of its impact. But I'm going to come at it and show you how the money actually flows. A little bit about myself. I'm a CPA, CGA by trade. I focus on academia, industry, as well as financial solution. But I look at government policy. I also look at economic trends as well as financial solutions with IT. Now, my agenda will talk about key issues from revenue neutral to retail pricing to household spending, and I'll actually give you an impact of carbon tax, carbon pricing. Now, when they tell you something's revenue neutral, what they mean is if I collect $1 billion of tax, I have programs to offset that $1 billion tax. So if I have $1 billion of revenue coming in, it's supposed to be offset through tax credits and other programs to offset that burden to taxpayers. That rarely happens in terms of things. The government can spell it out that way on their financial statements, but what they're not telling you is the impact on the supply chain management when they make some sort of major policy change, and in this particular case is carbon tax, and I will walk you through the impact throughout the chain. Now, retail pricing in general is made up of three buckets of cost. Typically it's their product cost, delivery, and markup. Now, the reason why I'm focused on consumer goods, 2/3 of the economy is driven by consumer spending. So when you're looking at that and you're looking at cap and trade or taxation policies that like carbon tax, they're all grouped together from the cap and trade. Know that it's all the policies, right? They impact the supply chain throughout because carbon's all part of that cycle, and that's never discussed in terms of its flow. We're not completely green in terms of our delivery, so therefore we're going to pass that cost through the chain all the way to the end user. When you go to that store to buy that bag of potato chips, that cell phone, or that TV, it's going to be passed along the way. And that's what this is kind of showing you in terms of retail pricing, to kind of give you an aspect in terms of where things, how costs are driven. You can't talk about anything unless you look at household spending. In general, goods and services in Canada are spent about $59,000 each year on a household. Now I'll break it into the quintiles and based on spending because you get different income groups, but this gives you a good chart to understand where spending is. Some of that spending will be subjected to any sort of carbon pricing model, because that's again comes back to how those goods flow through the system and how costing is passed on as part of the end pricing. This kind of gives you an idea of the low income brackets in terms of spending from 31,000 up to 162, which is your higher income. Now, this is what I want to walk you through. If you look at total spending from each bucket, from the lowest quintile where we look about 32K up to 162, you're going to be looking at several buckets: food, shelter, clothing, transportation. Now, not all those buckets within them are going to have carbon pricing attached to them. So for example, if you buy a car, the cost of carbon pricing will go into the cost of that car when you buy it, but it will be financed over a period of time. Insurance, not likely to influence that because it's based on a rating system, but it may have some impact based on cost, but it won't have a great impact. What I focused on were utility costs, I focused on food, focused on clothing, focused on public transit. I focused on those buckets that would be driven as part of the pricing models on how that cost is passed along to the end consumers. So the far right hand side gives you some of the assumptions I put in. So if I look at the lowest quintile, and I look at this, and I'm going to use 8% because that's a good number to use, because that's a number that's bandied around when you look at the overall retail pricing changes. You're looking at amount of money per year, about almost $1,100 for the lowest income person. It goes up to about almost 3K to the highest income. Okay, now every government likes to spell it out that it's only going to cost you $13 a month. Well, they should justify that number, because when I walk through the supply chain, and I've been working in supply chain management for a better part of 25 years, I say no way would that'll be $13 only to you. What I do see is it will likely cost a low income close to $100 a month and go up to $232 a month. Now, here's what you need to understand, and this is what I did in this calculation, the total spending. The carbon tax will impact the lowest income more than it will the highest income. So how is this tax really benefiting the low income people? Like, as much as these governments talk about they want to support the low to middle income, any tax like a carbon pricing or a tax, a consumption tax, actually hurts the low to middle income people more. That's not something that's discussed. And as you see in this chart, the ones that are going to pay the highest freight are the ones that at least can afford it. So what government likely will try to do there is probably come up with some tax credit programs. That's what BC did. But again, they do not work to the extent they keep control of pricing. And that's something that's always muddied in the water. And the other thing too is there's no linkage from doing all this carbon pricing and cap and trade to a big reduction in emissions. All you're really doing is passing more money onto a government. That's why you'll hear the term tax grab. Look at what's happening here. Every month, in general, you're going to be paying through that capital tax an extra $1,100 into the government through their tax capital pricing scheme, up to $3,000 to the highest income. So that's the thing that people don't understand. This is not about environment. This is more about a tax grab, and you can see by this particular schedule it shows you that's the case. I have other sources that you can look at in terms of understanding consumer pricing, carbon pricing, the Ontario plan. This kind of gives you a perspective. We're in a period of slow economic growth. That means there's enough pressure on household budgets. If you're going to see business having to pass that on to it, they're going to make decisions where they make investment. When they make decisions on investment, that impacts employment and impacts the GDP area. So when you start bringing in policies and mask them as climate change, all you're really doing is doing a tax grab to say that you're doing something. In general, you're hurting the people. This discussion needs to have a broad-based discussion. If business and consumers and taxpayers don't want this tax, why bring it in? And that's the thing that government doesn't seem to understand. They seem to be moving on an Agenda 21, which means they're going to hurt you in the end. You're going to pay higher price for things. And if that you want to pay for that, then keep voting a certain party in power, because that's what you're going to get. At the end of the day, there's only one taxpayer. That's you and me. So you need to ask yourself, when you're starting to look at these policies, to get away from the cheerleading session on climate change and look deep into these policies and ask clear questions. Why are these policies coming in? What really benefit does it do to me, both on the environment perspective and how my cost of living is going to be reduced? That's the questions you need to ask. I've done many presentations on this to give you a different angle on policies. I would encourage you to go out and do your own research on this and ask questions to your local MP, MLA, MPP to get specific questions of your concerns out there, because it's critical that we have a say. Thank you.